On the glittering stage of the Paris Opera in 1870, young ballerinas, some as young as 6 years old, danced for the delight of wealthy patrons. After the performances, these same men would mingle with the dancers in the opera's grand foyer, selecting companions for the evening. One man watched this scene unfold night after night, not a dancer, not a patron, but an artist with a razor-sharp eye. He sketched frantically, capturing not the glamour and spectacle, but the exhaustion, the rehearsals, the waiting, the mundane moments in between. He once observed, "People call me the painter of dancing girls. It has never occurred to them that my chief interest in dancers lies in rendering movement and painting pretty clothes." While other artists of his era sought to capture beauty and light, Edgar Degas turned his gaze to the shadows. Behind every graceful performance, he saw the strain, the discipline, the exploitation. Behind every public facade, he detected the complex psychological reality. When he exhibited this sculpture in 1881, with its real cloth tutu, real hair ribbon, real horsehair, critics were scandalized. One called it a threat of realism. Another saw the vicious muzzle of a little girl born too soon into the evils of life. The subject was Marie Van Gutem, a young dancer from a poor family. While Degas immortalized her, Marie herself disappeared from the historical record, likely dismissed from the opera for missing rehearsals, possibly forced into prostitution like many of her peers. This is the story of Edgar Degas, an artist who revealed what others concealed, who found beauty in truth rather than idealization, and whose complex legacy continues to challenge us today. Edgar Degas was born in 1834 to a wealthy banking family in Paris. Died in 1917, nearly blind and largely forgotten by the public. His long life spanned the reign of Louis Philippe, the Revolution of 1848, the Second Empire, the Franco-Prussian War, the Paris Commune, and the Third Republic. Though these political upheavals rarely featured directly in his art, though often associated with the Impressionists, Degas vehemently rejected that label, preferring to call himself a realist or simply an independent. Unlike the Impressionists who painted outdoors to capture fleeting effects of light, Degas worked almost exclusively in his studio, meticulously constructing compositions that only appeared spontaneous. Throughout his career, Degas explored a world in transition, the modern Paris of the late 19th century with its racetracks, cafes, laundries, brothels, and above all, the Paris Opera and its ballet. Though he never married and lived a largely reclusive life, his art penetrated the most intimate spaces of Parisian society, revealing hidden truths beneath polished appearances. As we explore Degas' life and art, consider this question. What happens when an artist looks beyond the surface to capture what others prefer to ignore? What truths emerge when the veil of idealization is torn away? Hilaire Germain Edgar Degas, he would later simplify his name to the more democratic Degas, was born into privilege in 1834 Paris. His father, Augustin, was a successful banker with aristocratic Italian connections, and his mother, Celestine, came from a distinguished New Orleans family. Music filled their home. Degas' mother was an amateur opera singer, and his father organized regular musical evenings. At age 13, Edgar lost his mother, a profound loss that perhaps explains his later emotional reticence and difficulty forming intimate relationships. His father raised the 5 Degas children alone, recognizing and encouraging his eldest son's artistic talents by taking him frequently to the Louvre. By age 18, Edgar had turned his bedroom into a studio and gained permission to copy masterworks at the Louvre. There he immersed himself in studying the techniques of Renaissance masters and contemporary French artists, particularly Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, whose precise line work would profoundly influence him. Unlike many rebellious young artists, Degas embraced classical training. In 1855, he entered the École des Beaux-Arts, studying under Louis Lamotte, a disciple of Ingres. This rigorous academic training and draftsmanship would remain the foundation of his art, even as he explored increasingly modern subjects. From 1856 to 1859, Degas undertook the traditional artist's journey to Italy. But rather than merely absorbing Italian light and landscape like most visitors, he filled countless notebooks with meticulous copies of works by Botticelli, Michelangelo, and other masters. Degas' early independent works were far from revolutionary. He painted historical scenes and family portraits in a traditional style, seeking recognition from the official Paris salon. Works like The Ballet Family, a psychologically complex portrait of his aunt's troubled household, showed his talent but gave little hint of the radical artist he would become. Even in this early work, however, we see Degas's characteristic interest in psychological truth. Look at how he arranges the figures. The mother standing protectively near her daughters, the father seated at his desk, physically and emotionally distant from his family. Through subtle composition, Degas reveals a marriage in crisis, a family unit fractured by tension. A pivotal moment came in 1874 when Degas' father died and the family bank collapsed due to his brother René's debts. For the first time at age 40, Degas faced financial pressure. The privileged dilettante was forced to become a professional artist, depending on sales of his work to survive. This necessity likely accelerated his move toward more commercially viable subjects like ballet dancers and racehorses. This financial crisis coincided with another pivotal moment in Degas' career, his participation in the first Impressionist exhibition of 1874. Though already established as a skilled traditional painter, Degas now aligned himself with these artistic rebels, helping to organize their independent exhibition after years of rejection by the official salon. Yet even as he joined forces with the Impressionists, Degas maintained his distinctive identity. While Monet and his colleagues painted landscapes outdoors, capturing fleeting effects of natural light, Degas preferred indoor scenes, artificial lighting, and carefully composed depictions of modern urban life. "No art was ever less spontaneous than mine," he famously declared. It was around this time that Degas first became fascinated with the world of ballet. With a backstage pass to the Paris Opera secured through wealthy subscribers, he gained unprecedented access to rehearsals and the private spaces where dancers prepared. This privileged vantage point would provide the subject matter for much of his most celebrated work over the next decades. By the mid-1870s, Degas had found his most distinctive subject matter, the world of ballet. But his approach was revolutionary, focusing not on glamorous performances, but on the demanding labor behind them. The dance class, painted in 1874, exemplifies Degas' unique vision. Rather than showing dancers performing on stage, he takes us behind the scenes to a rehearsal. The ballet master Jules Perrault stands center right, leaning on his stick as he supervises his young charges. Look at the dancers' expressions. Not smiling performers, but tired workers. Some stretch at the bar, others adjust their shoulder straps or scratch their backs. One sits exhausted on the piano. Degas shows us the physical toll of ballet, the disciplined, repeated movements required to create the illusion of effortless grace. The composition appears almost random, like a snapshot caught in mid-moment. This photographic quality was revolutionary for the time, influenced by Degas' interest in the new medium of photography and Japanese prints with their asymmetrical framing. Notice how figures are cropped at the edges, how the central space remains oddly empty, how our eye must travel around the canvas to take in the scattered activity. To understand the full significance of this painting, we must recognize the social reality it depicts. Most ballet dancers came from impoverished backgrounds. They began training as young as 6 and often became the primary breadwinners for their families by adolescence. Beyond their meager salaries, many supplemented their income through relationships with wealthy male subscribers who had privileged access backstage. While other artists and illustrators romanticize these dancers as ethereal sylphs, Degas shows us their reality. Young working-class women whose bodies are commodities in multiple markets. They sell their physical labor to the opera and often their sexuality to patrons. Yet Degas' gaze is neither sentimental nor judgmental. It is unflinchingly observational. The mirror in the background creates a doubled view of the room, expanding the space and allowing us to see dancers from multiple angles simultaneously. This device, which Degas often employed, serves both compositional and thematic purposes. It multiplies our view while underscoring the constant self-surveillance required of dancers, forever examining their form and reflected surfaces. When exhibited in the first Impressionist exhibition of 1874, the dance class challenged conventional expectations. Critics noted its strange framing and lack of finish, yet many recognized its innovative capture of modern life. One reviewer praised how it revealed the whole intense and feverish existence of these young dancers. With works like The Dance Class, Degas established himself as a keen-eyed chronicler of modern life, particularly the hidden labor that supported the leisure and entertainment of Paris's upper classes. While seemingly just depicting dancers at practice, he was actually creating a subtle social document, revealing truths about class, gender, and exploitation in the glittering capital of 19th century Europe. While ballet would become his signature subject, Degas also explored other aspects of modern life, including the world of business. In 1872, he traveled to New Orleans to visit his mother's family, who were involved in the cotton trade. A cotton office in New Orleans, completed in 1873, depicts the interior of his maternal uncle Michel Mousson's cotton firm. The painting shows various family members engaged in different aspects of the business, examining cotton, reading newspapers, and conducting transactions. At the center sits a man examining raw cotton, testing its quality between his fingers. This intimate knowledge of the material was crucial in determining its value. Around him, other figures represent different aspects of the business: accounting, correspondence, sales. The composition creates a microcosm of commerce in the Reconstruction-era South. Remarkably, this business scene shares compositional strategies with Degas' ballet paintings. Notice the sloped floor reminiscent of a stage, the scattered groupings of figures like dancers in rehearsal, and the window light similar to stage illumination. Even the interior windows resemble the mirrors used in dance studios. The painting's significance extends far beyond family portraiture. Created just 8 years after the end of the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, it depicts a cotton industry struggling to reinvent itself without enslaved labor. What the painting notably does not show is the black labor that still underpinned every aspect of the cotton trade, now in the form of sharecropping rather than slavery. This omission becomes even more striking when we learn that several of Degas' relatives depicted in the painting, including his uncle Michel Mousson, were involved in white supremacist groups working to end Reconstruction and restore white control. The painting's seeming neutrality masks a deeply troubled historical moment of racial oppression. Despite, or perhaps because of, its avoidance of racial politics, a cotton office in New Orleans achieved a significant milestone. In 1878, it became the first painting by an Impressionist artist to be purchased by a museum when the Municipal Museum of Pau in France acquired it. Critics praised its realism and dignified portrayal of modern business. This painting reveals both the power and the limitations of Degas' observational approach. While he unflinchingly depicted the physical realities of ballet dancers' lives, he remained silent on the racial exploitation underpinning his family's cotton business. His realism, it seems, had boundaries shaped by his own social position and the attitudes of his era. In a Café, painted between 1875 and 1876, depicts two figures at a marble café table, a woman staring blankly ahead with a glass of absinthe before her, and a man beside her equally disconnected despite their physical proximity. This masterpiece captures the psychological toll of modern urban life with devastating precision. Look at the woman's expression, vacant, exhausted, lost in her own thoughts. The pale green liquid in her glass is absinthe, known as la fée verte, the green fairy, a highly alcoholic spirit that was both popular and controversial in 19th century France. Her posture suggests someone who has retreated entirely into herself, using alcohol to numb whatever pain brought her to this moment. The composition is masterfully unsettling. Degas places the figures far to the right, leaving a vast empty space that emphasizes their isolation. The diagonal lines of the tables create depth while simultaneously separating the figures from us and from each other. Even sitting together, they exist in completely separate psychological worlds. To understand this painting's full impact, we must recognize the social crisis it depicts. Absinthe consumption had reached epidemic proportions in 1870s Paris, particularly among the working class and artists. Cafes served as both social centers and refugees for those seeking escape from urban pressures, but they could also become traps for people drowning their sorrows in alcohol. The models were Ellen André, an actress who posed for several Impressionist painters, and Marcellin Desboutins, an artist and friend of Degas. But this wasn't meant as portraiture. Degas was using these individuals to represent social types, to capture the anonymous alienation of modern city life. While other artists depicted café life as charming and sociable, Degas reveals its darker psychological reality. His café is not a place of connection, but of disconnection, where people sit together to yet remain fundamentally alone. This vision of urban alienation wouldn't be fully explored again until the existentialist movements of the 20th century. When exhibited at the Second Impressionist exhibition in 1876, the painting scandalized critics and public alike. One reviewer called it the dregs of society, while another described it as showing only the most vulgar reality. Victorian sensibilities were shocked by this unflinching depiction of addiction and despair. In a Café represents Degas at his most psychologically penetrating. While his ballet paintings revealed the hidden labor behind spectacle, this work reveals the hidden loneliness behind social gathering. He shows us that modernity's promise of connection through urban life could just as easily produce profound isolation. Today, when we see people sitting together in cafes while absorbed in their phones, when urban loneliness has become a recognized epidemic, Degas' vision feels prophetic. He understood that proximity doesn't guarantee connection, that the modern world could surround us with people while leaving us fundamentally alone. As Degas aged, his eyesight began to fail. This physical limitation paradoxically led to greater artistic freedom. He turned increasingly to pastel, which allowed him to work with vibrant colors that he could see more easily than the subtler tones of oil paint. His style became broader, more expressive, and in some ways more modern. His late pastels of dancers and female bathers reveal a new interest in color and pattern, sometimes at the expense of precise anatomical accuracy. These works, with their vibrant hues and bold compositions, would influence later artists, including Henri Matisse and Pablo Picasso, forming a bridge between 19th century realism and 20th century modernism. The 1890s brought personal and societal crises that profoundly affected Degas and his work. The Dreyfus Affair, a political scandal involving a Jewish army officer falsely accused of treason, divided French society. This case revealed the depth of anti-Semitism in France and forced people to take sides. Degas took a firm anti-Dreyfusard position, revealing a virulent anti-Semitism that shocked even some of his friends. He severed ties with Jewish colleagues, including his longtime friend, the composer Ludovic Halevi, and reportedly refused to use Jewish models. This prejudice, always present but now openly expressed, permanently damaged his reputation in progressive circles. Already known for his difficult personality, described variously as gruff yet sensitive, arrogant and discerning, and possessing a wit that could be charming or cutting, Degas became increasingly isolated. His circle of friends narrowed, and he retreated further into his work, focusing obsessively on capturing movement through sculpture and pastel. Meanwhile, his eyesight continued to deteriorate. By the early 1900s, he could barely see. He turned to sculpture as a more tactile medium, modeling figures in wax by touch as much as by sight. These sculptures, primarily of dancers and bathers, were never cast in bronze during his lifetime. They remained private experiments, tools for understanding movement and form. His daily routine became ritualized. Long, solitary walks through Paris, sometimes getting lost due to his poor vision, followed by hours in the studio working from memory and imagination, rather than direct observation. The artist whose sharp eye had captured the most fleeting gestures now had to rely on his mind's eye, on decades of trained visual memory. As a result, his late works show a remarkable evolution. The precision of his early style gave way to broader, more expressive strokes. Colors became more vivid, compositions more daring. Though he continued to depict dancers and bathers, these figures now existed in a more abstracted, emotionally charged space. Critics today see in these late works a bridge to modernism, anticipating the expressive use of color by Fauvists and the fragmented space of Cubism. In a cruel irony, as Degas' physical vision dimmed, his artistic vision seemed to expand. Freed from the tyranny of exact observation, he created works of startling emotional power and formal innovation, drawn from the depths of his visual memory and imagination. Edgar Degas died on September 27, 1917, at the age of 83, and Paris had more pressing concerns than the passing of an elderly, reclusive artist. His funeral was small, attended by just a few loyal friends. He left behind a studio filled with thousands of works, paintings, pastels, drawings, and sculpture, many never exhibited in his lifetime. When the contents of his studio were sold in a series of auctions beginning in 1918, the art world was astonished by the quantity and quality of previously unseen works. Particularly revelatory were his sculptures, about 150 wax figures, primarily of dancers and bathers. Though Degas had exhibited only one sculpture publicly, Little Dancer, aged 14, these private experiments revealed his ongoing fascination with capturing movement in 3 dimensions. After his death, about 80 of these wax figures were cast in bronze, preserving works that would otherwise have deteriorated. This process, while necessary for conservation, transformed intimate, colorful wax models with real hair and fabric into monochromatic bronzes, changing their essential character from mixed media experiments to traditional sculptures. Degas' posthumous reputation has undergone significant reevaluation. Initially celebrated primarily for his technical virtuosity and observation of modern life, more recent scholarship has increasingly focused on the social and political dimensions of his work, particularly his depictions of class and gender relations. Feminist critics have questioned his relationship to his female subjects, noting the voyeuristic quality of many of his bather scenes and the power imbalance implicit in his backstage access to young dancers. His anti-Semitism has further complicated his legacy, raising questions about separating artistic achievement from personal prejudice. Despite these complexities, Degas' artistic influence has been profound and far-reaching. Pablo Picasso collected his work and drew inspiration from his bathers and dancers. Henri Matisse built upon his innovative use of color and pattern. His experiments with cropping and unusual viewpoints influenced photography and cinema. His integration of drawing and color helped bridge the historical divide between line and color in Western art. Perhaps most significantly, Degas forever changed how we see ballet. Before him, dance was primarily depicted as a spectacle viewed from the audience. After him, the backstage world of rehearsals, the physical labor of dancers, and the social realities of the institution became visible. Today's backstage ballet photography and documentaries showing the grueling work behind the performance are direct descendants of Degas' revolutionary vision. What makes Degas' vision so enduringly powerful? Perhaps it's his unwavering commitment to seeing reality as it actually exists, not as convention dictates it should be portrayed. By rejecting idealization in favor of observation, by finding beauty in gesture, movement, in everyday moments rather than in conventional prettiness, he created art that feels perpetually modern. Degas understood this when he wrote, "Art is not what you see, but what you make others see." His art makes us see beyond the spectacle to the labor that creates it, beyond the finished performance to the rehearsal, beyond the social facade to the psychological reality. In doing so, he teaches us to look more deeply at our own world, to question the surfaces that conceal deeper truths. Edgar Degas remains a complex, contradictory figure, technically conservative, yet conceptually revolutionary, socially privileged, yet drawn to document working lives, capable of profound empathy in his art, yet expressing disturbing prejudice in his personal views. Perhaps his greatest achievement was to show that true art doesn't simplify or beautify reality, but reveals its full, complicated truth, with all its shadows and light. Degas revealed the hidden labor behind every moment of grace. In our age of curated perfection, his truth feels revolutionary. Subscribe now for more artists who dare to show what happens when the cameras aren't rolling. Tell us, what behind-the-scenes reality deserves more recognition?